Hello, hello. We are live. Happy to be here this Wednesday afternoon for me, but happy Wednesday morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started with a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll meet our wonderful panelists and get started with an awesome conversation. So my name is Heather Grant. I am one of the community admins of the maintenance community by Upkeep. Thank you once again for making the time to be here today. If you are not already a member of the maintenance community on Slack, I will add the link on how to sign up in just a moment. Today I have with me 4 wonderful panelists. I will kick it over to them in just a moment to hear some introductions, but I'm looking forward to a great conversation on leadership for maintenance managers. The recording from our session today will be available right after we end at the same link or in this maintenance community on Slack tomorrow. Our panelists themselves are actually all available there as well to answer any questions that you may have. So feel free to share the recording of this panel or the invitation to Slack directly with anyone you know who would benefit from hearing some of this group's expertise. Last piece of housekeeping before we get started, you will notice that your cameras and microphones are not turned on today. So what you'll want to do if you have any questions for our panelists is you'll use the chat feature there on the right-hand side of your screen. Feel free to pop in, say hello, introduce yourselves as well. We'd love to meet our live audience. That is just about it for me. Thank you once again, everyone, for being here with us, joining us today. And I will kick it off with some introductions. Rob, would you like to go first? Would love to hear a little bit more about you, your background, where you're based, what's your role at your company, and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so I'm Rob Kalwarowski. I suppose I've been in the heavy industry for about 10 years now. I currently work as an asset system manager at Enbridge, managing large bore valves from northern Alberta all the way to Houston and out to eastern Canada as well. Previously, I worked in consulting and mining. I'm probably most well known, I guess, from Rob's Reliability Project podcast. And I suppose now I host 2 podcasts. One is called the Leadership Launchpad Project, and the other one's called Dismantling the High Performance Narrative. And that's me.
Awesome. Jim, why don't we hear from you next? Tell us a little bit more about you, your background, where are you based, what's your role at your company, and how did you get to where you are today?
Absolutely. My name is Jim Entagam. I've been in the industrial world for over 3 decades, so a lot of experience in the engineering maintenance field. I presently work for a company called Associated Materials Inc., or Gentech Building Products, and I work as a senior support manager in our CI team on the maintenance division. So I take care of the maintenance management and do a lot of training and so on and so forth. And so I'm here today to obviously engage in leadership discussions.
Awesome. Garrett, over to you. Why don't we hear a little bit more about you, your background, where are you based, and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so I'm Garrett Earl, obviously, and I'm a reliability engineer with Cargill, and that's over in I'm based out of Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And how I got to where I was today is probably stumbling my way through it. And realistically, came out of school, got a job with Cargill as an engineering associate, then moved into a maintenance supervisor role shortly after. And then obviously somebody thought I was doing something right, so they gave me the reliability engineering role a little bit after that. And then I've been in that role for the last 2.5 years, managing the planning and reliability team.
Awesome. Well, we're happy to have you here. And then last but certainly not least, Charlie, would love to hear from you. A little bit more about you, your background. How did you get to where you are today?
All right. Well, I'm Charlie Matthews. I am the founder and CEO of Empowering Brands, which is a digital media marketing services company, which got me here, I think, into the maintenance community. We have a publication, if you will, media source, however you want to say it, where we focus on connecting the industry. And that gets me to know all of the maintenance, operations, engineering, marketing, everybody. And I just fell in love with it. I have 3 children that I encourage to do something in the world of manufacturing, engineering, maintenance. I can't forget maintenance, right? And, I really fall in love with the industry and the people. And I just love to be your cheerleader and figure out how we can build better leaders. That's why I'm here.
Awesome. Well, super happy to have all of our panelists joining. Thank you again for making this time today. We have kind of a set list of questions that we've pulled from the maintenance community over the last couple of weeks. These questions came directly from community members when asked, what do you want to know about leadership for maintenance managers? So we have more than enough questions here to last us an hour. But if there are any questions from the live audience as well, we'll do our best to incorporate those, as the conversation flows. So a couple things to talk about today. We got questions on kind of two different sides of being a leader in maintenance management. So on the one side, that's being a leader of your direct team of, your manager of people, you're a supervisor to technicians. There's that side of the house. And then the other side of leadership that we got some questions on was how to be a leader that represents maintenance in your department and your team and what you're doing within your larger company. So how do you kind of balance those two, and some more questions underneath that. So our first question is kind of on the side of how do you represent maintenance within your company? How are you, yourself talking about it and being its best advocate, especially because we know that maintenance teams or maintenance activities and value kind of sometimes takes a while to materialize. So knowing that, what's something that you maybe do to really emphasize the value of what your team is doing, either to them or more broadly within the organization? Take it off to anyone.
Garrett, go.
Okay. So I guess like I'll share a few things. So I think the first thing that I do on a daily basis is that I think it's much like feedback of like, you can't just talk about it one time at the end of the year. You got to be talking about it all the time, right? So I love talking about the successes and the progress that our team is, and not just say with the management, but also even within my team, right? If we're pointing out those small steps to progress, it helps them to see the value of, say, what we're doing and get them more engaged, right? And so then what I'll also do is say, for example, what I try to do is just share the stories within the maintenance departments, within the planning group teams, all throughout our facility, right? So say, for example, a planner goes and does a lot of work on equipment BOM, right? He said, I'm going to go, when I'm talking about that to that area supervisor, I'm talking to the mechanics on the floor or whatever, I'm going to basically share that. I'm going to show them that. I'm going to speak to that and all these amazing things that they're doing, right? And then the other thing I love to do is like point out when we learn something new. I like to joke, right, that we learned something new, we can pack it up for the day. But that again is right, just showing that, helping to point out that progress, right, of when we learned something new. And then the real big way that I've started to kind of show that value to different people within my organization is I started something what I call the reliability save of the week. And basically each week we kind of recognize someone that has done something to improve the reliability of the plant, prevented a downtime situation, or say took ownership of a situation to really make sure an ongoing issue was resolved. And so what we do with that is I'll send out a plant-wide email to all of management in the facility, kind of in hopes that some of the upper management that they end up sharing, just tell that guy, good job, right? We then do a little bit of a write-up, which we share in our toolbox meetings, and that's more trying to create some peer-to-peer recognition. And then we'll share it in our Hall of Fame board, and then also on our company's kind of social media, and then give them a small gift with that, and to try and even showcase it a little bit more. As I have sent it to some of the people at a corporate level within the reliability team to just showcase hey, we are doing some things, and we're trying to recognize people for it.
So I'll piggyback on that, since we have the industry person of the week at Empowering Pumps and Equipment, which I've featured a couple of you on there. Most recently, Rob, I think it's this week, right? You're it. Anyway, basically what we do is ask some questions and get a lot of people nominate somebody within the industry. So similar to what Garrett is doing, but I would say that we use our platform to give maintenance people a voice and basically say, okay, what do you like about your job? What do you don't? Why are you there? And where would you like to see it going? It's just really highlighting the people that are doing the work. And so I said, I'm your cheerleader. I'm also, I've got a big megaphone out there, and making sure that I tell the stories. And I think that's really important. It's important to, tag people in those posts so that they get recognition and they are able to, share their story and, maybe get a high five at work or, probably also like people picking on you too. But that goes with the territory. And I think that's the best way that we can really help maintenance managers.
Awesome. In my situation, a little different. I deal with 6 maintenance managers through our corporation on one division. So it's basically the same thing as Garrett's doing with his people, but on a little bit bigger scale with these maintenance managers. The interesting thing I find is that just having conversations, open conversations every week. You pick one of the maintenance managers, you just sit down and you just talk. And it's interesting to see the common thread of problems and the common solutions that come up from these people. And just giving them a voice and somebody to listen. Because most of the time, I think that's we as human beings don't do enough of listening and asking those questions. How are you today? How's it going today? And like most of the maintenance people in the world, I find that we're all living in the trenches. We don't get this breath of fresh air where we can actually come up and see what's actually taking place. Most of the companies that I've dealt with in the past and present, we're expected to be more than just maintenance managers. We have to be technicians. We have to get on the floor and do a lot of trench work. And we don't manage from the trenches. We need to be above the trenches to see what's going on. So it's great to give people, an opportunity just to speak their mind, find out those common threads, and then, do whatever I can on my part to help them achieve their goals or get a little bit more in their emotional bank account as far as kudos for what they're doing and so on. So it seems to be working so far.
Like let's talk about that a little bit, right? So there's like the Institute for Employment Studies says that there's four factors in employee engagement. And one of those factors is the extent to which employees feel able to voice their ideas and managers listen to these views and value the employee's contribution. So that is just one of the 4 factors. And like really what everybody else in this panel has been talking about is that. And part of that is like promoting people and showing them that they're valuable and that they matter to your organization, they matter to the community, they matter to the world. And it's like a massive, it's a massive core need that we all have.
Rollout, right? So which is supposed to be like
Yeah.
end of June, July.
I love that. I'm hearing a bit of it's about kind of celebrating the small wins as you go. Progress does take time. Rome wasn't built in a day, as they say. And despite that, adding the small wins, celebrating the small wins, acknowledging a job well done, as well as giving visibility, I think is another common thread I heard here. Giving visibility into that for people outside of the trenches, as Jim might say.
Well, also, there's one other thing. When you do that listening and you do that asking of the questions, you find out what the problems are they're trying to solve. And I think that's really important, is it allows them to speak and allows them to voice that concern. And then, once it's out there, people can try to help them fix it. And so I think that's also a part of the story, is what is their pain point that they deal with every day.
Yeah. Awesome.
I think to add to that, though, question I always ask is, who works for whom? If you're a leader, who do you work for? Do you have people work for you, or do you work for the people? It's a double-edged sword here that we need to talk about, because as leaders, if you've been in that position, you know that you have to take care of the people that work for you. So in essence, you're taking care of their needs, their emotional needs, and their physical needs that they need, whether it's tools or supplies or all these wonderful things that we have to do. But it becomes an important discussion where does the training lie in for people like ourselves in learning about leadership and being vulnerable and psychological safety. Because if one can't be psychologically safe in themselves, how can you go out into the community and lead others and give them that safe space? And that's what I'm finding very difficult this particular juncture. We can talk about, lubrication and FEMAs and PMs and all these wonderful things, but we never get really in the meat and potatoes of human beings and people. Because the realm between a person and a machine really is the same. You have applied stresses and resistance to stress. And stress can come for people in many, many different avenues. People come from home and they may have sick children. They may have financial issues. There could be a whole host of things. So they come to work with all these applied stresses, and they're trying to resist those stresses. And then when they get to the workplace, they come with lack of training, or in maintenance world, it's lack of ability to even fix anything or get PMs completed or corrective maintenance and so on and so forth. So now we have all these work applied stresses. And when the resistance to stress falls below the applied stress, there's our absenteeism. We get insubordination. We get people that just don't have any motivation anymore. You'll see the suicide attempts. You'll see there could be the violence at work, so on and so forth. So those are the things I think at times that we really need to focus on. For me, anyways, personally, that I see, and I've had lots of conversation with Rob on this topic, and for 3 decades of being in this industry, nothing's really changed. It seems that we're still trying to use the same tools for the last 30 years, and probably if you talk about Latino, it'd be way more than that, trying to get a different result, and it's not happening. And we all know the insanity. So we need to step up to a level higher than the thinking that we're using right now to solve some of these issues. And I really think getting into that leadership skills and giving people the ability to understand leadership from a whole different level, whole different perspective, of vulnerability, of understanding psychological safety, of creating that trust, creating the workplace where people go to as a means to grow and be better, and hopefully go back to their home and be better than what they, where they are right now. And so that is a topic I think it has many avenues to go down. But myself personally, I see that need. And thank God, Rob, you're putting on those and Charlie, for the courses that you're putting on, and for the conversations you're having with audiences outside of this, because I think it's very, very important.
I don't think we're going so
Yeah,
far.
absolutely agree. And one thing that you said made me kind of excited, because it is about understanding ourselves and really getting into what is causing us to feel a certain way. We don't even know what our stresses are sometimes. You named a couple of the obvious ones, but what about the ones that are tripping us up that we don't know about? I think that's really important too. So you talked about vulnerability. I know we're going to get into that, but I think that's part of it. When you're going through that, you have to allow yourself to be open, and really open with yourself. I know that sounds really weird, but that's definitely part of it, is understanding yourself. So Heather, what's next for us?
Yeah, well, Rob, did you have something you wanted to jump in with, or next question?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, like, this stuff makes a ton of sense, and the reason basically comes back to the foundation of what work was when it started. And a lot of the principles that we apply to work come out of, like, quote unquote scientific management out of like the 1900s. And it's basically like I am going to stand on an assembly line and I'm going to turn one nut this many times, and that's all I'm going to do 12 hours a day. And like, the world has changed. Like, even our mechanics, they're not just doing one simple like bolt turn. They're doing complex jobs. They're troubleshooting. They're doing a lot of different things. And like, it's people at the desks were doing different things. And I think that's the thing that we need to realize is maybe that worked in 1900, but it's 2021 and it's not working.
Nope.
And we know it's not working because look at the statistics. Like, look at your plant and tell me that everything's perfect. Like, there is nobody listening to this and nobody in the future who is going to have a perfect plant. Like, it's just not possible. And it's because we're not doing the right things.
Yeah, I think you could reference
Yeah.
it to
There's definitely great points, and there's a couple of different threads in there. I'm going to just jump all around our questions list now, but there's a couple of different threads in there I want to pull while they're top of mind. I think one of which is this kind of idea of some people don't know what they don't know, right? People have blind spots as leaders, as humans, but especially as leaders, if you have blind spots that you maybe don't know about, or you know, aren't working on actively, or there's gaps in your leadership skills, how do you kind of address that, and where are some places to go, you know, to figure out what your blind spots are, to take that first step of maybe, hey, I need to learn more on this topic? How do you figure out where those are?
Should I sell it, or do you guys want to sell
I
it?
was just
sell it.
about to
I'll sell
say,
it.
I was ready to
Leadership
jump in.
Launchpad
I know. LLP program coming up.
Yeah, so it's kind of a joke, but Garrett and Charlie were part of the first round of the Leadership Launchpad Project program. Jim is going to be in the one that's going to be starting in a few weeks. And basically, we start there. We start at you looking at yourself. We start at some of these things about what Charlie was mentioning. It's like, you have to understand yourself. You have to understand what you're feeling and understand where things are happening to you that maybe you're coming up against your comfort level, your comfort zone. Maybe that's the limit of where you can be today. And then you need to start asking yourself why, and digging into basically the mindset around what's limiting you and how to change that to make yourself the next generation leader, the better leader that you want to be. And it's constant work, and it's not easy. As at least a few of you know, it's not easy, but it's like on the other side of it is really this continuous improvement type of lifestyle. And it's like, I think a lot of companies out there and a lot of leaders out there, they talk about continuous improvement, but they're not actually putting in the work. And the panelists here with me today, they put in the work.
Yeah. And I think another thing with that is when you are doing the work on yourself and being part of a team and in a group setting, you're learning from them as well. And so you're able to take that back to work, take that to your team, and you're going to be able to see things that come up for them, right? When I love one example, when I can see, you know, through Zoom, right, my employee, if they're frustrated, you can kind of tell in their body language. And I'm like, okay, no, tell me what's really happening, because you pick up on it, and you don't want to just let them handle that all by themselves if you can clearly see that something is going on. And so just asking the question, like Jim was saying, you know, ask the question about, okay, what is really going on here? This is a safe space to tell me exactly what's going on, right? But, you know, you have to be able to show that you're doing that for yourself in order for them to trust that for you.
Absolutely. I think to add to that, Charlie and Rob, I think 30 years ago, the tools were not in place like they are today. The sciences are not in place like they were to take us to a new level of thinking. And, you know, it is a journey. Simon Sinek he talked about millennials, and I love this guy. He just said it. He said, we have people that want to do a great job. Just like maintenance want to do a great job. Engineers want to do a great job. Production people want to do a great job. But sometimes they see the base camp and they see the summit, but they forget there's hard work between there. So it is our jobs as leaders for our own self to work through that hard work and teach people those ethics to move forward. And I find that, again, the tools have changed immensely in the human performance. And I find it very interesting that even Clive Lloyd in his book, he references a gentleman by the name of John Phillips, great leader. He uses him as a great example. And he mentioned the story he put on LinkedIn. It had 100,000 people, I guess, that looked at it, liked it, so on and so forth. But he said of all those people agreed with the principle, but they didn't seem like they wanted to continue on moving forward to apply it to their own life. And that's the same as the Leadership Launchpad program. And when I look at these programs that are out there, and these, you know, to take us to new levels, how many people don't engage themselves in this? So we got a lot of people talking the talk, but not a lot of people walking the walk. And that's what we need to do. We need to stop thinking about ourselves and think of a higher purpose. So I think we need to start to focus more on the people side. So I've been doing that for years. You know, it's not, like I said, maintenance wasn't about getting PMs done. It's about get people to do the PM or get them to do the work that's required.
Or to
And
see themselves, right, Jim? To
yeah,
see themselves doing the work. I just think about Garrett, and because he was in my team there, he did a lot of work. You know, we all did, but
absolutely.
he did a lot of work in this maintenance space. Yeah, I'm curious your perspective on that too.
Well, you look at Garrett where he started and where he's ended. Like, how many people, Garrett, came to you after the fact? Do you know, when you told your story, and I listened to your story, and we've had these conversations, you and I, Rob, and Dylan, and so on, and just from the ideas that you've taken to give people some hope that, hey, somebody is listening to their needs. Somebody's actually cares. Most people, they just want to know that they're appreciated. What they're doing is being appreciated, and just the art of you doing that and listening and appreciating what they're doing has turned a lot of your maintenance people around. Did you have somebody that was 25 years in the business where you were, and now he's engaged, and he wasn't engaged, he lost all motivation? That itself, if one person can change their mindset, you've done a fantastic job, and kudos to you for what you've done. Now you can take those skill sets and apply it to a different place. One thing I will add, I said this before to you, you're developing your skill sets as a leader, but your direct report above you needs to take care of you as well. Because if you're in a leadership program and there's nobody taking care of you as a leader, it becomes very difficult, because it is a two-way street. You need to have your needs taken care of as well as taking the care of needs of others. And it's very difficult when you're a lone wolf trying to do that, because you don't want to give up on the people you have. But yourself, you need that reprieve too. You need to know that you're going in the right direction. So hats off to you for all the great work you've done, and it's paid off.
Well, geez, thanks. I mean, like, I have to give the credit to you guys though too, right? Like, I think what also here, right, is that when we talk when what Rob and Charlie and all these guys are talking about understanding yourself first, is like, right, when I came to Rob with this leadership launchpad project, right, I had frustrations, right? I wasn't the leader that I probably could be, right? And what I was surprised is, we started digging into myself, right? And I wasn't realizing all the things that I was doing that were causing me to show up without, like, not with alignment of where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do and how I wanted to impact my team, right? And I think you just don't understand, like, it's in what they say, right? And I'll tell you, it was hard work, right? Like, digging into yourself, right? It's in our industry, right? We don't go, I don't know, we don't like talking about our feelings and our emotions and stuff like that, but it's vital to understanding how you're going to show up for your team and how you're going to show an alignment with whatever you're trying to accomplish there, right? And I want to say the other thing that's been huge is that system that's been created from that leadership launchpad project for me was, right, I got to meet, like, just listening to these guys, right? Every time I hear them, I'm so in awe of the things that they're doing in that, right? And it's like surrounding your people with people that are thinking the same way, and you are almost inspired, and you want to drive, right? They're bringing out the best in you, right? And when even what you're saying with Jim of having that support system as well, how I describe it is, I got my support system through that leadership launchpad project by meeting you guys, right? I know, right, that was things that I battled with, was like, oh man, am I a leader? Am I a good leader? Right. And right. And these self-doubts and these beliefs. Right. But then what I came and I heard was from you guys was that, no, you are a leader, you are doing it. Right. And that made me feel empowered, right, to basically go out there and show up for my team. Right. And that the stuff that I was doing was making a difference. Right. And it was huge, right? I had no idea the impact, how the impact that we were making, right? That impact that you can make. And like you said, Jim, it's just like showing up for your people, right? I've heard it in the conversations with those guys, those people that were disengaged, right? It's like, man, you treat us like people. Like, how hard is it to just treat people like other people? Yet that's making the world a difference in this engagement and the progress and the results that we're getting, right? And bringing people back from being disconnected. Absolutely. As much as we're saying we are kind of machines, we're not machines, right? We're not machines, and you can't treat people like machines, and you need to show up and you need to care about them.
Oh, that's good stuff right there. We as leaders never want to feel alone at the top. We shouldn't feel alone at the top as a leader. Like you have nobody else to help you. And that's kind of, at a lot of the times, that's where we are getting stuck. And so that team approach was really helpful. But I think you established that for your group too, so that they didn't feel alone in something they were trying to accomplish at work. And so, we talk about emotions and the things that we learned about ourselves, but we also learned about what we wanted to accomplish at work and get out of your way so that you can go get those things done. And I think that was really, really powerful too.
And I'll leave you guys. Yeah, go ahead, Garrett.
I was just gonna say, like, absolutely. That's what I'm talking about with that alignment, right? I was showing up and I was doing things that weren't in alignment with what I was trying to accomplish, right? And then I learned of like what I needed to do to impact these guys, or like, right, that wasn't in alignment of what I needed to do to impact these guys. So it's what these guys are saying. It's gold.
And you're going to carry
Thanks,
those
Rob.
life skills, and those life skills are going to be carried on to your personal life as well. So it's a win-win all the way around, my friend.
That's so much truth there, Jim.
Yeah. You'll probably instill it in a future leader as well. I think a lot of what you're saying is about walking the walk and leading by example, and putting in the work yourself so that your team can see that and then take those steps themselves as well, right? So you being a better leader will empower them to be a better technician as well and do their job as well. People do want to do a good job. And they sometimes just don't know how. And so modeling that behavior as a leader, I think is something that's really important.
So I don't.
And part of that, right, is like setting your people up for success, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like walking the walk. I mean, I'm sure everybody in the chat and everybody around this table has worked at a company that has values on the wall. And at the first moment, those values are like unchecked. And like for the vast majority of us, it's like safety is number one. And then when it comes down to making an investment to follow that through and like fix something that's broken, that's unsafe, or replace something or whatever, they go, it's not a production issue, we're going to fix this other thing instead, right? And that's where you destroy trust with your people. But setting your people up for success is another huge aspect. And it also does contribute to engagement, right? Like if you tell somebody go out there and say like, hey, go change the tire on your car, but you don't give them, you don't give them a jack, you don't give them tools, you don't give them how to do it, you don't give them a spare tire, like they just get checked out because they don't have the ability to execute the job that you're giving them. That can be the training, that can be the tools, that can be the processes, that can be the authority. Those things are all massive. And like what I see a lot is we are trying to make a difference. We're trying to get equipment replaced. We're trying to do predictive maintenance or PMs, and we can't get the equipment because it's running, or we can't get the budget for something because whatever. Like this is the way, if you're higher up in the organization, you need to make sure that those, like they're kind of smaller items, but they're absolutely important.
Well, you touched on authority. I thought that was really strong because that's really where we limit our people is by, really all we have to do is say like, okay, you have access to this, and they run with it because they're maybe holding back just to not step on your toes or whatever the reason is. But basically, once you kind of open that up and give them a chance, they show that they're better than you think most of the time, and just allow that space for people to learn and grow and mess up, and it's okay, right? So creating that, I think it's in this space, there's some critical things that you don't want to happen, right? So what can you allow them to do to get up to that confidence level in their skills? And so, I think there's a lot of things that we can do.
Yeah. And like attitude to risk and failure is a measurement that we measure when we measure psychological safety. And that's exactly it, right? Is you want to let people experiment, like continuous improvement. You cannot do it without experimentation, right? You have to make a hypothesis, try something, measure it, see what happens. If it doesn't work, you start over. And if it does work, maybe you go, hey, can I make it better? Can I do more? Whatever, right? And it's like we cannot judge that as a failure. We need to see that as what it is, experimentation. But the other side of it, right, is we work in safety sensitive environments. And so we have to understand and draw barriers around what is okay to fail and what's okay not to fail, right? We can't have a failure be someone gets killed. That's terrible. But we can have a failure is we tried this on this machine. It didn't work. We'll try something else tomorrow.
Yeah. Do you find, Rob, too, that there's a lot to be said about diversity and growth? We find that, depending on our, I guess, our own psychological safety, whether we can handle criticism or not. But most of the time, if we look at the diversity of thought, that's where all the growth lies. That's where the growth happens. So again, if we go back to ourselves as leaders, learning that vulnerability and an objectiveness, in knowing nothing, we learn everything, kind of. We're open to learn everything. We apply those kind of principles. Now we're taking ourselves and our teams to whole new levels. Our circle of influence has increased immensely. And I find that to be a stumbling block right now, even in places that I've been employed with. So it's interesting to see what happens as we move forward, applying more of the skill sets of leadership more on that vulnerability side to open up and be more objective thinking.
There's so much, Jim, about diversity and inclusion that we won't have time to cover.
No.
But I mean, just getting into it is just like, diversity is more than just the external, what the person looks like, right? Like Jim and I have diverse thoughts, and we're both white men, right? And a lot of what comes down to, and the power that you can unlock with diversity and the power you can unlock with inclusion, underneath all of that is psychological safety.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you, and I always explain it this way, diversity is having the person in the room. Inclusion is the person feels like they belong in the room. And psychological safety is the ability for that person to speak up in that room and share whatever they're thinking without fear of judgment. And that is the power that if we start there, it unlocks inclusion, it unlocks diversity, and it unlocks performance.
Well said.
That's awesome. Another question that we actually got kind of goes right along with this theme that we're talking about. It's about vulnerability and how vulnerability translates to trust within your team, right? So I'm wondering maybe what are a couple of the approaches or mechanisms that you use to create space for leaders, or that you would recommend for leaders to use to be able to express vulnerability when they maybe don't know the answer, or they're dealing with something from either their manager or in what they're doing day to day. And how does that kind of translate to building trust within a team?
Yeah, so vulnerability is basically the first step to form connection. And then connection and trust kind of go, and psychological safety, they're things are different about them, but they kind of go hand in hand. In terms of vulnerability, like where to start, I mean, first off, you kind of need some ground rules, and they call it a container usually. But basically that's where you need to start, because if you just go out there and start sharing everything, it's not always the greatest move, right? And it's like, I mean, one of the examples that people use is like, if you're at a company and you're going to your annual board meeting, and you stand up there and you go, "Hey, I have no idea what I'm doing." Like, obviously that's kind of like not the point. But a great place to start for most leaders, and something that I recommend, is tell them about yourself. Tell them your story. And it's more than just the list of like, "Hey, I work here and I work there and I did this and I did that." It's who you are. What do you love to do? What do you not love to do? What lights you up? What about your kids? Where are you from? Like these type of things. And it really opens the floor for people to do it themselves. And vulnerability, I talk about this a lot too, but vulnerability is a snowplow. You can plow a hole into the room for people to go in behind you. And that's really where you have to start as a leader, because without vulnerability, people won't speak up. And that's where you lose out on inclusion, psych safety, all the other stuff.
Do you find, Rob, that sometimes the best way to create that rapport, that limbic synchrony, is to have the common ground, a problem, not the. I found that myself in a room when I used to train corporately around the world, I found that to build that rapport was to first identify with the same problems that we're having. And if you had, and as soon as we got that off the table, there was this connection was built.
Special.
And then when we were doing the training, if I was leading a group and giving them some training on software or so on and so forth, if I didn't know the answer to a question, it was so easy to say, I don't know, but let's find out. And just those simple little words of I don't know, let's find out together made a world of difference. Again, you build that rapport and then you admit that, hey, you're human. You don't know. You don't know everything. But, at least you're inviting others to come in and join you in that journey to find out what's really happening. What can we do to make this better or find the answer? Maybe we'll find it, maybe we won't. That's the nice thing about whiteboards. You can use them as a great diagnostic tool.
I love this question. I just saw it, and it was something I was thinking about. I may have just posted in the chat how a leader should handle if there's a conflict of interest with this employer. I was just trying to think through, if there is a person on your team that's causing problems, and you hear about these problems from, say, a different employee, okay, and you're the leader, and you've got several data points coming into you about, okay, this is a problem and you don't know how to solve it. But as you're talking to people, maybe you're saying, well, I'll look into that. And you kind of keep note of all of these different things that are happening with this person that's affecting the company culture. We'll say that. And how do you deal with that? And when do you deal with that? I think is another part of that. So I think when it starts affecting other people's work and they can't get their work done, then you really have to figure this out. And one thing that happened that just kind of sticks in my mind for me was, we saw this conflict, and when it arose, like through a group message or whatever, where somebody was just maybe commenting, saying something negative to the team, and you're like, okay, here we go again. I basically said, thank you for your unsolicited advice, which I know is kind of harsh back at them. But the other person who had told me about it was kind of like, okay, thanks for having my back. Okay. And so it was just like a little, just thanks for your input, but we don't really need that in the nicest way possible that I can say it. But it was really the whole point of it was for that other employee that was kind of having these negative feelings tied to somebody else's work. And so that's all that she felt heard because I had her back and I kind of stood up for her, if that makes sense. And, you can always go back and kind of explain that situation to the other employee. But at that moment in that time, I said, I've got your back. I've heard you along the way, and this negativity needs to stop, basically. Here's an opportunity to just handle it right here. And I think it made all the difference just because I had heard the stories along the way and looked for the opportunity to say, okay, how can I influence this in some particular way? And I think it had to be a team message to everyone so that it kind of was like, okay, well, I think I need to change my behavior because this was to the whole team. I don't know. It's an example. I know it's kind of a rambled example, but it's definitely one that sticks with me, to just listen to your people and pick up on all of those different conflicts. And then your job as the leader is to figure out, okay, how can I impact that and influence that to be for good for our team to stay together?
I think you're going to run into situations like that where you end up with people that are disgruntled no matter what they do. No matter what you say, no matter what you do, you're going to have these disgruntled employees that there's something outside of the workplace or something or a value system they have in place or something in their life that has caused them this pain. And no matter what you do, you can't get around it. So you have to make those tough decisions as a leader. Is the need of the one versus the need of the many. So Charlie, I like your point of how you had to use as a group and say, hey, look, in an indirect way, you're saying knock it off, or if you have an issue,
I have said it in a direct way as well.
Yeah. come and see me. We'll talk about it. Garrett, how have you ever had that, or have you run into that situation
with the conflicts and stuff? Yeah, like for me, I've seen it happen. I think lots of that time with those conflicts is that, right, it comes down to asking more questions sometimes about it, right? Like exactly what Charlie does. You got to put a stop to it immediately, right? And then it's getting into those more questions and understanding what's really actually maybe underlying there, and why is this behavior, right, occurring, right? And what you might find is that absolutely there's so many different factors, right, that influence people, and you're gonna realize it, right? And often how I say it is sometimes on my teams is you don't always have to like everybody that you work with, but you got to be able to work with them, right, and treat them with respect and dignity and stuff like that. And which again, it all just comes down to treating people like people, right? And what you in those instances of that conflict, right, is that you need to make sure that you're bringing them up, and you're also being a voice and trying to, even coming back, creating that vulnerability, that peace, that safety, that they're able to be honest with you of what's going on, right? And then just addressing it, right, and being honest, right, of like where the misalignment is, right? I know for conversations that I have a lot of the time is actually right from when I start, right? When I came into that reliability engineering role, is I had a conversation with my team of like, hey, no, things are different or weird at the plant here, but I expect out of you guys that no matter what the situation is and stuff like that, is that you always act in a respectful manner and a professional manner. And if you do that, I will have your back no matter what and support you in every way possible, right? Is that if you're going with that, we'll sort through those other conflicts and those interests, right? But right, at the end of the day, people just got to treat people like people, and then and then understand that there's other influences.
Yeah, I'll also add kind of the way that I got that data was to have regular meetings with my people. So it was a theme that kept coming up too. So I think that's really important to say. And then the other side of that question was, okay, you've got a problem with your boss. What do you do? And so you got to understand, why do you have the problem? Why is this really frustrating you? Why is there a conflict? Before you can address your boss with it, you've got to understand, why is this bothering me? And I think that that's really important to dive in again to self and figure out, the real reason why you're upset.
I'm getting fired up over here.
Okay, good. Go. It's you.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously most of you know I spend a lot of time in therapy, but a lot of why we get angry and why we have reactions to things is because we feel inadequate in some way, or we have this belief or trauma that was triggered inside of us. And so that's where I want to start people with is, and we did get that question in the Heather in the document you gave us, right? And it's like, what do you do if your person's not doing well, or they have an ego or whatever? And for me, it's lean in with curiosity and try to understand why. Because in a lot of cases, the person feels like they're being attacked in some way, or they feel like they have to do something in some way in order to protect themselves in the world. And that's really the root of why a lot of us don't get along, right? It's and if you're in a relationship, it's like the things you fight about with your wife or your husband it's not like a lot of really, like, it's not like one of you, for the most part, right? They're kind of like inane things, but it feels like an attack on somebody for some reason. And actually, if you're in it, and I was in one this morning with a call that we had, the person literally said like, hey, you said this and it made me feel this way. And immediately the person was like, well, that wasn't my intention. This is what I actually meant, but I hear you and I'm sorry. And it's like that lens and that way of leaning in is so massive when you're trying to have these difficult conversations, because otherwise it's just a non-starter.
Exactly. I think you brought up a good point, Rob. It still boils down to understanding yourself and being open-minded, getting rid of that confirmation bias and halo effect we get, where we take one issue and one situation and then we apply the same strategy of negative thinking to another, and it becomes our own worst enemy. Or we look at that confirmation bias, just the finger pointing, look at the truth that makes it right for that one finger, and those three pointing back, that is the truth that doesn't make us right, we totally ignore. So there's a lot to be said when it goes back to understanding oneself. And and hats off to you to bringing that up. That was a great response also to the situation you just described. I'm sorry, if I've offended you, blah blah blah. It's not what I intended to do, because words and expressions and tonalities and timbre of voice make a difference in the way we express ourselves. Mm-hmm. So that was a great example. Thank you.
Yeah. I think at the foundation of that too, there has to be trust between you and the person you're speaking to, right? Like if you have that conversation with someone who you don't know very well, it may be received very differently than if you have a conversation with someone who you have a good rapport with and a good relationship, and they trust you to be telling them the truth and all of that. So I love that it's all coming together. I do want to ask one more question before we hop off. I noticed we're nearing the end of our hour here. So a question I'd love to go around and hear from everyone on who's a highly influential leader that's impacted your career. Maybe we can't all say Rob, but
other than Rob.
Who's somebody who's impacted your career, and what was their standout quality? What made them like that? Influential.
Yeah, and much needed too. You need to rest.
I can start with this one. So first thing I want to say is that I already kind of said it, is that, man, the people that I've met through this Leadership Launchpad project with Rob, Charlie, Jim, Dylan, Brian, Susan, like those have been some huge leaders that have impacted my career, right? And really the standout quality for me is like that, is more just the awe and inspire, right? That it is, right? Of just being around people that support you and believe in you, right? It's like I said earlier in this call of that, right? They were instrumental in helping me believe that I was a leader, and that has launched me to the next level of that. And then what I also want to say is I'll shout out somebody within Cargill too. I had a leader by the name of Perry Fox, and what his thing was he was, how I would describe it is, he was patient with me and empowered me. And basically what the perfect example of that, of what I say, is that he allowed me to basically go out, fail, and then was there to pick me back up and mentor me. And the example that I have is that the first time that I ended up letting someone go, it didn't go very smoothly because I didn't have probably the proper conversations that I needed to have. And at the end of the day, when I came out of that final conversation with this employee, was that I felt pretty inadequate as a leader. And Perry, having known that this was an instance, came, talked to me, and we had a long conversation. And it was about, okay, yeah, like you feel this way, but so like, what are we going to learn from this? What are we going to do different? What actions can we take in the future? Things like that really basically, which allowed me to basically learn from this opportunity where I had probably, right, realistically failed as a leader, but it's been huge in developing myself as a leader, because he was willing to let me go out, somewhat fail, get into these uncomfortable situations, but then was there for me to pick me back up in that situation and help me learn and grow from it. So
I'll go next. My first experience with kind of this epiphany, and she was a mentor. She's a friend. She helped me, create my business, as that was her role at incubator. It was for incubator for entrepreneurs. So that was her job. But her grace and just the way she carried herself, I was admiring her from afar before I worked with her. And I just stayed connected with her along the way. I got to see her as a mom, as a working mom. I got to see her with her, pulling her hair out and then, going to work and showing up. And I just admired her. But she also, her name is Gina Simpson, and she was part of the Empowering Women's Conference, and she came and spoke. And I met with her because she kind of, disappeared for a little while, was doing her job, and I was like, what's going on with you? And we had lunch, and I was telling her about how nervous I was to cry on stage for this Empowering Women's Conference because I had so much I wanted to say. It was so important. And I wanted to make sure that I was able to get the words that I wanted out, right, to perform. And she says, so what if you cry? It doesn't matter. Like, that's you. Like, get over it, Charlie. It's not about you. It's about what they need to hear. And that statement, every time I step onto a stage, go into one of these rooms, I try to think, what do they need to hear? And that really changed my life to the point where, it's easy to come on here and think about how do you serve people? What do they need to hear from you that only you can give them? And that's being your genuine self. So I learned how to do that through the Launchpad. I absolutely am a big fan and advocate of y'all going to Leadership Launchpad. But you just need somebody to say, hey, you got this, you know what you're doing, and, remember your mission. And I think that's what she did for me.
Awesome.
You got one, Jim?
Yeah, I was going to say awkward silence. I've had so many mentors. I look at so many books and so many people that have met my life. Obviously, being a bit older, I've been inspired with colleagues at my workplace, and even people that wouldn't even know that they've inspired me. People on floors, production people that have given me some great guidance and said some things to me that opened my eyes to being more objective. Obviously, Susan Hobson's, she really was a great person to deal with. Rob, I love what you do, and I love listening to the podcast, so on and so forth. I listen to everyone's stories, yours also. Charlie, listen to your podcast and so on. So I can't nail it down to one person, but I can sure nail it down to a host of different experiences of life. And I'm very fortunate to have been in some great situations to grow and be more than I am. And that's the strive of life, is to always try to grow and learn and never stop learning. So there's mentors that are still waiting for me to show up somewhere so they can guide me in a further along the route starting in June. And that's about it for as far as that is concerned.
It's funny, right? Yeah. For me, Susan's a huge one, but the biggest thing I think is and what I find inspirational about this group is each one of us and them, we showed up, right? And we did the work, and that's why we're here. And if I didn't go to Susan, I wouldn't be here. And there wouldn't be here. Well, yeah, maybe that is true as well. But it's that's the thing, right? Is the first step is showing up for yourself. And Garrett talks about, not being able to get a budget for vibration training, and basically the guy paid for it himself, and Garrett paid for his own himself. And it's I think I said this on your thing, Charlie, but it's we often in this industry wait for our company to deem something as part of our path. Mm-hmm. And we wait for that path to illuminate in front of us. And then we sort of just follow the path. At some point, and I still struggle with this, but you have to choose your path. What do you actually want to do? What do you actually want to become? Who do you want to become? And once you answer those questions, the path illuminates for you, and you can take the path, right? And this morning, that meeting I was telling you guys about, I'm in a psychological safety certification course, so I can go into organizations and evaluate their psych safety.
Yep.
I took that because I see a huge need for that, not only in my experience, but also out with everyone who's listening. So it starts with understanding yourself and why you're here, and then taking action on that.
Such a change in your life, Rob, from where you were to where you are now. Yeah.
I don't know, Jim.
No, seriously though, hats off to you. I really do want to say, man, hats off to you, Rob, because you've come a long ways on your journey. And seriously, sometimes you can't see the forest like we can. And I'm sure Charlie's and Charlie and Garrett, and I'm sure Dylan was here, he'd say the same thing. We kind of see your life unfolding in a whole different direction. You have helped so many people. You have touched so many lives, unbeknownst to yourself. And a big thank you to you, and hats off to you. You are making a great impact on the world, and the world needs more Robs. Trust me.
Take it in, Coach. Take it in. Take it in.
I needed that, Jim. It's been a bad week for me.
Yeah, you know I got your back, man.
Wow. Not only Rob is so wonderful, all of the other panelists here today too, so wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing, for your vulnerability, for helping advise and coach the leaders that we have and future leaders as well. I appreciate you taking the time to be here. I do want to offer everyone a moment to maybe just drop your information in the chat on how people can stay in touch with you and follow up and learn more. I know we have the Leadership Launchpad and a podcast episode in there, but any other ways that our attendees and future on-demand attendees as well can get in touch with you, whether that's LinkedIn. I know you're all also in the Slack community, so that's another one. I will drop that link in just a second, but any other ways that people can follow up. Awesome.
Well, I'd love everybody to send me a note of their most awesome person that they know in the maintenance community that I get to highlight. So go ahead and send me an email.
That'd be awesome. Well, thank you once again, everyone, for being here, all of our panelists. It's been an awesome conversation, all of our attendees as well for joining, and future attendees for watching. I will see you all next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye, guys.